sits in the middle of a desert. No major river running through it. No natural lake nearby. Nothing. Almost every drop of water that city uses comes from one single source, Lake Mead. And a few years back, that source started running dangerously low. We're talking about the largest reservoir in the entire country, and it was dropping fast. Decades of drought, rising demand, a warming climate, all of it hit at once. The water line kept falling, year after year, and engineers realized something terrifying. If the lake dropped low enough, the old intake pipes wouldn't even reach the water anymore. Las Vegas would be looking at a real water shutoff. Not a drill, not a worst-case scenario in some report. An actual, physical dead end. So the Southern Nevada Water Authority did something drastic. They didn't wait around hoping for more rain. They went underground, literally, and built a brand new way to keep the water flowing, no matter how low that lake got. All in, the project ran close to $1.5 billion. That's the number we're breaking down today, and trust me, the engineering behind it is wild. Let's get you the real background first, because this story only hits different once you understand what was actually at stake. Quick history lesson, and this part matters. Lake Mead was formed by the Hoover Dam back in the 1930s, and for most of the last century, it stayed pretty full. But starting in the early 2000s, things changed. A drought settled over the entire Colorado River basin, and it just didn't let up. Year after year, the Water Authority watched the lake drop. By the 2020s, Lake Mead had fallen over 150 feet from its highest recorded level. You could actually see the old shoreline exposed along the cliffs. This pale, bathtub-ring stain running for miles, marking exactly how much water had disappeared. To put that in perspective, when Hoover Dam first went up, engineers considered it one of the greatest achievements in modern construction. It tamed the Colorado River, powered an entire region, and created a reservoir so massive that at full capacity, it could cover the state of Connecticut in about 10 feet of water. For most of the 20th century, nobody seriously worried about that reservoir running low. It felt permanent, almost limitless. That's exactly what made the drought of the 2000s and beyond so unsettling. Something that looked untouchable was visibly, measurably shrinking, year after year, right in front of everyone's eyes. Here's the part that made engineers nervous. Las Vegas had two original intake pipes pulling water from the lake, and both of them sat at a certain elevation. As the water kept dropping, it got closer and closer to that elevation every single year. If the lake fell below it, those intakes would be sucking air instead of water. City planners weren't just worried about inconvenience here. They were staring down an actual crisis for 2 million residents and one of the biggest tourist economies in the country. So back in 2008, construction crews started on what everyone now calls the third straw. The idea was simple on paper, brutal in practice. Drill a new intake tunnel far below the lake bed, deep enough that it would keep working even if the water dropped to historically unprecedented lows. Now, building this thing was not easy. Crews had to bore straight through solid rock, nearly 600 feet beneath the surface of the lake. They used a massive tunnel boring machine, grinding through bedrock around the clock for years. Divers and engineers worked in conditions most people can't even picture. Extreme pressure, complete darkness, water hundreds of feet above their heads. The whole project took about 4 years just for the tunnel itself, and it finally went online in 2015. Think about the actual mechanics for a second. This wasn't a simple drilling job, like punching a hole in a wall. Crews were working under a massive body of water, boring horizontally through rock that had been sitting undisturbed for millions of years, all while making sure the tunnel stayed perfectly sealed against the immense pressure pressing down from above. One serious miscalculation, one weak point in that rock, and the entire project could have flooded instantly, putting every single worker underground at risk. Construction crews described the work as some of the most technically demanding tunneling ever attempted for a domestic water project in the United States. But even after all of that work, engineers discovered something even more worrying. But here's the twist. Even the third straw eventually needed backup. As the drought kept grinding on through the following decade, the lake kept dropping toward levels nobody expected. So the Water Authority built a second phase, the low lake level pumping station. This one's a massive facility designed to physically pull water up and push it toward the city, even if the lake keeps falling far below where gravity alone could ever get water moving on its own. Between the tunnel and the pumping station, the combined project reportedly landed at around $1.5 billion, an enormous number, but a small price compared to what a dry city would have cost. Here's the crazy part. What's wild about the engineering itself? That intake structure isn't just a pipe sticking out of the water. It's a massive vertical tower, reaching down through the lake toward the tunnel entrance far below. From above, on a drone shot, it almost looks unreal. This huge cylindrical structure rising out of the reservoir, surrounded by that dramatic exposed shoreline. It looks more like something out of a sci-fi movie than a piece of municipal water infrastructure. But it's real, and it's been quietly keeping one of America's biggest cities alive. But that's not even the biggest challenge. Let's talk about why this actually mattered so much. Lake Mead supplies roughly 90% of the water Las Vegas uses. Not some of it, almost all of it. Golf courses, hotel fountains, casino pools, and every single household faucet in the valley all trace back to this one reservoir. If the intakes had failed, there was no simple backup plan. No neighboring river to tap. No quick fix. The entire regional economy, tourism, entertainment, millions of residents, was tied to keeping that water flowing. And this wasn't some far-off hypothetical. Water levels actually reached historic lows during this same stretch, dropping to percentages of capacity that hadn't been seen since the lake was first filled decades earlier. Officials weren't exaggerating for headlines. The math was straightforward and genuinely alarming. Keep building deeper access, or eventually run out of ways to reach the water at all. Compare that to other major cities facing water stress around the same period. Some places responded with restrictions, banning lawn watering, limiting pool refills, asking residents to cut back. Las Vegas did plenty of that too. Some of the strictest conservation rules in the country, honestly. But restrictions alone don't fix a physical engineering problem. You can conserve every drop possible, and it still doesn't matter if the pipe itself is sitting above the water line. That's the part most water conservation conversations miss. This wasn't just a demand problem. It was a hard physical limit, and no amount of shorter showers was going to solve it. What makes this story stick with people isn't just the price tag. It's the timeline. This wasn't some rushed emergency patch job. Engineers saw this problem coming years in advance and built a genuine long-term solution, digging deeper than anyone thought necessary at the time, specifically to future-proof the city against a drought that just kept getting worse than predicted. So here's where we land. Las Vegas didn't run dry, and it's not because the drought suddenly ended. It absolutely didn't. It's because a group of engineers looked at the worst-case scenario years ahead of time and built their way around it, boring through solid rock hundreds of feet underground to make sure the water never stopped. $1.5 billion is an enormous number, but stack that against the alternative, an entire desert metropolis losing its only water source. And suddenly, it doesn't look expensive at all. It looks like exactly the kind of investment you make when there's no room for failure. That's the real story behind those dramatic aerial shots of the exposed shoreline and that strange tower rising out of the water. It's not a mystery. It's not an anomaly nobody can explain. It's just one of the most impressive, least talked about engineering projects in the country, built quietly underground while everyone else was watching the lake shrink. And honestly, that's the part that deserves more attention. Most viral infrastructure stories get attention because something went wrong. A bridge collapses, a dam fails, a system breaks down under pressure. This one's the opposite. This is what it looks like when engineers actually get ahead of a crisis instead of reacting to one. No headline-grabbing disaster, no emergency evacuation, just years of quiet, unglamorous work happening hundreds of feet below a shrinking lake, specifically so nobody up top would ever have to find out what happens when a city like Las Vegas actually runs dry. Sometimes the greatest engineering success isn't the structure everyone notices. It's the disaster that never happens. If you are into the stories like this, real engineering, real stakes, real consequences, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we've got more of these coming. Drop a comment if you want us covering more infrastructure stories like this one. And if this one surprised you, send it to someone who still thinks Las Vegas is just casinos and neon lights. Shadow Discovery, signing off.